Chiefs news, analysis, and opinion every day. After a single game of rejoicing, the mainstream media seems to be coming back around to the conclusion that they're going to be watching the Chiefs in the Super Bowl once again. There is an article from Bleacher Report talking about defense, and I'm not going to suggest that this article is disrespectful or even neglectful. I just think that they've missed a couple of things that the Chiefs have done this offseason that are going to make this defense better than it was last year. In an article titled Ranking Every NFL Defense After the 2025 NFL Draft from Bleacher Report by Gary Davenport, we get the following. We live in an age when the NFL is more heavily tilted toward the offense than ever before. Each year, the rules change in an effort to boost offensive production that much more. A defensive player could log 200 tackles, 25 sacks, and cure every illness known to man, and he wouldn't win MVP honors. Neither would Patrick Mahomes at this point. We're 2 or 3 years from a wide receiver being named Defensive Player of the Year, but here's the thing, defense still wins championships, just as Kansas City Chiefs quarterback Patrick Mahomes. That part is disrespectful. Who is still having nightmares about the pounding he took from the Philadelphia Eagles in Super Bowl licks. That part, even more disrespectful. But don't worry, we're going to expose the author for who he is. All 32 NFL teams just spent the offseason attempting to get better defensively, although some had more work to do than others. It was easier for the Eagles to offset personnel losses than for the Carolina Panthers to offset the fact that they stunk in 2024. Still, every team did the best it could, even if some had more success than others. With the 2025 NFL Draft and the majority of free agency done, let's rank all 32 defenses from tomato can to terrifying. Number 9, the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, it must be said here, Patrick Mahomes plus a top 10 defense means you have a legitimate opportunity at a ring every season. And guys, I don't think that the Chiefs are going to rank as low as 9. We'll get to why in a moment. But the article does continue. Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City offense gets most of the run. But the Chiefs wouldn't have dominated the AFC over the past couple of years without help from the defense. Last year, they were 9th in total defense, 8th against the run, and 4th in points allowed. The Chiefs were relatively quiet in free agency on defense. Outside of the addition of a couple of defensive backs, Christian Fulton has the potential to be an upgrade at cornerback, while Mike Edwards was the cost-efficient replacement at safety for the departure of Justin Reed. The team was more aggressive defensively in the draft. Tennessee defensive tackle Omar Norman-Lott has a real chance for early playing time after Tershawn Wharton and Derek Nottie left in free agency. Louisville edge rusher Ashton Gelati may not see playing time right away, but the Chiefs defensive coordinator Steve Spagnuolo loves depth off the edge. Fellow third-rounder Noel Williams of Cal could also earn some early snaps as a sub-package cornerback. Outside defensive tackle Chris Jones, linebacker Nick Bolton, and cornerback Trent McDuffie, the Chiefs' defense doesn't have a lot of big names, but Spagnuolo has a history of molding talent into a cohesive and formidable defense. Now, one thing from that final paragraph there that we need to analyze, because it has become a hallmark of a Brett Veach offseason, and it has become something by which the Chiefs can claim maybe not dominance, but a competitive edge. Defensive tackle, Chris Jones. Linebacker, Nick Bolton. Cornerback, Trent McDuffie. Those are the 3 biggest names of the Kansas City Chiefs defense. That much is true. What is something that should stand out from this lineup? There's one player at each level of the defense. That is incredibly helpful to having a cohesive defensive unit. But here are 3 reasons why I think that this Chiefs defense is being underrated going into next season. What was the main heel of the Chiefs defense last year? It appears so there's 3 things that you could say really hurt the Chiefs. 2 of them are very closely related, but I think the main thing that everyone would kind of consider was the main reason we were pulling our hair out during that last run was the fact that cornerback number 2 was a very stressed position during the year, falling all the way down to Najee Johnson, a former 7th-round safety, to step up and play number 2 corner for the Kansas City Chiefs. That was after the injury of Jalen Watson. Of course, Jalen Watson, another former 7th-round pick, who has stood out for the Chiefs from the very first game of his rookie season. He was injured, went down. All of a sudden, the position itself was thrown into a little bit of chaos. That has been addressed. It has been addressed with a free agent. It has been addressed with a return from injury, and it has been addressed through the draft. So the player who played number 2 cornerback for the Chiefs last season might not make the team this year. So Christian Fulton was signed to play corner for the Chiefs. He might be cornerback number 2. He would be a solid cornerback number 2. There is no reason to believe from Christian Fulton's career in the NFL that he should be anything less than a number 2 corner. Then you have the return of the aforementioned Jalen Watson from injury, a guy who has outperformed not just his draft status, but expectations that have been put on him every season, barring injury. He has come in and performed as a rookie. Expectations were raised, performed better in his second season, expectations were raised, and then, guys, when he went down, the Chiefs really missed his performance, letting us know that even from the expectations that were put on him, he was performing at a higher level than perhaps we recognized. So, Jalen Watson, the guy who was last year's number 2 corner, is this year's number 2 or 3 corner. And then you have the entry of Noel Williams, to whom we will return in a moment. But Noel Williams is a ball-hawking cornerback who has man-press specialization. So, all of a sudden, maybe Najee Johnson is your number 5 cornerback. Maybe Najee Johnson does not make the team. So the guy who was the number 2 cornerback last year and was exploited at that position, right? You had Trent McDuffie holding it down on one side and Najee Johnson getting picked on the other side. Not his fault. He is a number 4 type corner in the NFL, and he was thrust in to the number 2 spot. It's a rough position to be in. But this year, he is not going to be the number 2 corner for the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, the next thing that stuck out about last season's defense versus previous iterations, the past couple of years of this Chiefs defense, is that the sacks weren't there. After a couple seasons and rings with the Chiefs being in the mid-50s in total sack numbers, they fell all the way down to 39 total sacks in 2024. They got to the Super Bowl anyway, but the defense struggled all season to get to the quarterback, to stop the offense, to get off of the field. Part of the reason there was that they saw more injuries along the defensive line and injuries to players like Charles Omenihu, who were being counted on as... So Charles Omenihu last season was playing the role of Hollywood Brown this season, if you get what I mean. Charles Omenihu was brought in and missed a whole lot of time and was brought back on essentially the same deal. That's what happened with Hollywood Brown this season. But hopefully Hollywood Brown does not miss all of next season with a suspension or an injury, etc. But the same thing happened to Charles Omenihu twice. Suspension and injury kept Charles Omenihu from being a Kansas City Chief for very many games during the regular season. And frankly, last year, so the 2023 season when Charles Omenihu returned, he was a real shot to the defense, an injection of power and relentless force off of the edge, and frankly, as an interior defensive player, an interior defensive lineman as well. Didn't happen as much last season. Hopefully, what was at play there was just a little bit of rust, right? 2 years of not really playing a whole lot of football will get even the most perennial of pros down a bit. The hope with Charles Omenihu is that he has a return to form and snap count this season. The edge position was also addressed with the signing of Janarius Robinson. Perhaps a small move, a guy who hasn't made a whole lot of waves in the NFL, but he was a guy we looked at in a video on his own who has some potential to maybe expand his game in Kansas City. Somebody who does have some physical tools, and should he be able to exploit them in a Steve Spagnuolo defense, could really be a contributor at the edge position. But here's the big thing that the Kansas City Chiefs did this offseason with the defense. The Chiefs, like we saw in that final paragraph of the article, addressed each level of the defense in the NFL draft. They had 2 picks along the defensive line, which will be the engine from which all of those other problems with the defense could be fixed. You don't like cornerback number 2. What's a good way to make cornerback 2 better? Make sure the quarterback can't get the ball out of his hands, right? There were 2 picks on the defensive line. Second-rounder Omar Norman Lott is a pass-rushing interior defensive lineman who has a whole lot of juice. Ashton Gillotte is a high-motor pass rusher. If you can use one word to describe both of these guys, it's juice. They're both very active. They're both very high-motor. They both love to get after the cornerback. And they're both nonstop from snap to whistle. That is going to help. So the worst case scenario there with both of these guys is that Ashton Gillotte maybe doesn't have the most tools, right? He seems to be a higher effort player, though a lot of his tools are fairly close to George Karlaftis. In his draft video here on the channel, we compared the two of them, and physical tools wise, they're not all that far apart. But the big thing here is adding defensive pressure off the outside. Now, George Karlaftis does a decent job every snap, plays a lot of snaps. He's better, we've seen, when he's able to take a few more snaps off per game. So hopefully a heavier rotation will get him there. But the pressure off of the edge, pushing the quarterback up into the waiting arms of Omar Norman Lott and Chris Jones. Now, the third big problem with the defense last year, number 1 was, in my opinion, cornerback number 2. Number 2 was the pass rush, just wasn't getting home. Number 3 was tight ends just destroyed the Chiefs' defense. Week in, week out, big names, small names, guys who had never caught a pass before, it didn't matter. Tight ends destroyed the Chiefs' defense, and Jeffrey Bassa, a draft pick out of Oregon, is a coverage specialist linebacker, which addresses the third biggest weakness from last season, that tight end position. Will he stop it? I don't know. But Mike Edwards was also brought back. Mike Edwards he's one of these safeties that just happens to be in the right place at the right time all the time. That is a very impressive thing about Mike Edwards. And finally, Noel Williams, we talked about him a little bit in point number 1, but here's the way that this all sort of gels together, the way that this all sort of cohesively moves the defense as a unit, is that Noel Williams is a press man corner, which will make things more difficult on the quarterback in the first couple of seconds after the snap. There will be no quick release with Noel Williams covering his man. He's going to be right up in his face. And if you throw the ball then, Noel Williams, who is a ball-hawking cornerback, will just step up and make the interception. Obviously, that sounds easier than it is, but the big thing is Noel Williams is good at throwing a receiver off of his route in the first couple seconds. So all of that gels together to mean in the passing situation, the first couple of seconds of the play are problematic for the offense. After that point, it becomes very difficult to get back on the rails, which leads to more sacks, which leads to more interceptions, which leads to more throwaways. That is going to be the deciding factor for the Kansas City Chiefs defense in this upcoming season. And guys, if Patrick Mahomes isn't playing with the 9th best defense in the NFL, but the 5th best defense in the NFL, things get very, very good for the Chiefs very, very quickly. That is all I have for this video. If you like or appreciate what it is that I do here, hitting the like button really does help me out, as it tells YouTube to share this video with other Kansas City Chiefs fans. And if you find yourself here by chance but not design, the Chiefs are the only thing I talk about on this channel, dropping multiple videos every single week, and hope to have you back for the next one.